My name's Karen. Welcome to Heart of the Chart. Today we're going to talk about Joe Biden's chart. But first, where I'm going to do an energy offering, and today I'm going to do a Pluto wash. The reason is because Joe Biden is a very Plutonian person. Number one. Number two, we are going through a very Plutonian time as a collective. Pluto rules things like grief, loss, transformation, those types of things. So if you're open to receiving that energy, great. If you're not, just say no thanks. I'm going to start that Pluto wash now. That's going to last about 9 minutes and will shut off automatically. Okay, let's get to Joe Biden's chart. First of all, he has Sagittarius rising. Now the rising or the ascendant is on the far left-hand side. It begins the first house. The rising sign is how we're seen by the world, but also the lens that we look at the world through. So Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, is a positive, upbeat, expansive kind of energy. So usually someone with Sagittarius rising will give their smile to the world. In his case, the ruler of the Sagittarius ascendant, Jupiter, in Cancer, is in his 8th house. So already we get into the Plutonian theme because the 8th house is the natural house of Pluto and the sign Scorpio and those types of issues. The first house, the rising sign, also rules the physical body, the personality, and with Jupiter in the 8th, let me look at the aspects here. It's in Cancer, so Jupiter's very well placed there. It's called Exalted in Cancer. Let's see. Jupiter's trine his Sun, Mercury, and Venus in the 12th house and square his moon. It's an expansive personality. Jupiter gives luck and growth through whatever it touches. So he's emotionally large, if you will. A lot of emotional energy. His moon's well placed in Taurus, exalted as well. So the squares from Jupiter aren't particularly challenging. You know, usually you'd say a square would be challenging. Not particularly. It's just, it's expansive. Because Jupiter's called the Grand Benefic. So even the challenges can just maybe lead to over-enthusiasm about certain things, right? But the trine to the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, all in the 12th house, just give more energy to those placements. So because Jupiter is aspecting both the lights, both the Sun and the Moon, and rules the ascendant, he pretty much puts a lot of who he is out to the public, you know, through the ascendant. This is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what it's about. And Sagittarius is also associated, Sagittarius and Jupiter are also associated with philosophy. So this is what my philosophy is. This is what my higher ideas are. Let me let you know about it. That kind of thing. The second house is traditionally called the money house, but it's also values and where we place value. He has Capricorn on the ascendant, on the cusp of the second house, and that's in the 7th house. So he values partnership, 7th house, right? That Saturn is in Gemini. So he values partnership, but also one-on-one, because the 7th house is also, you know, if the first house is me, the 7th house is you. So that one-on-one discussion, because it's in Gemini, he likes to exchange ideas with people regularly. and also his values, because the second house is values. So he likes to discuss values. Let's see, what else? Yeah, Saturn is sitting next to or conjunct Uranus. So, you know, at some point he may shift his values based on life experience or based on discussions with other people, that type of thing. The third house is communication, it's neighbors, it's short journeys, things like that. He has Uranus on the cusp of the third house of communication. And again, Uranus is in the seventh, right on the cusp of the seventh, actually, in Gemini, conjunct Saturn. Now, this can be issues with speech. This is that foot and mouth disease thing. Because anytime Saturn is like ruling the third house, in the third house, aspecting the ruler of the third house, Saturn can cause like speech delays. And Uranus is lightning fast. I feel like this is what it feels like to me. His mind is moving at a different speed than his mouth. And so that could cause some issues from time to time, right? And then the South Node is in the third house in Aquarius. And the South, it's actually a nodal axis. So the South Node's in the third, the North Node's up in the ninth, and this is a karmic thing. The South Node is where we come from, where we're comfortable, and what will fall back. It's like the fallback guy. It's where we'll fall back to anytime we are uncomfortable. The ninth house is kind of the idea of where we need to grow to in this lifetime to really live our purpose or our mission or, you know, the reason that we're here. So the South Node in Aquarius is humanitarian, loves everybody, right? And the third house is kind of the neighborhood. That's the area that it's in. So he just kind of wants to talk to the guys in the neighborhood. That's his fallback. That's where he'd like to be. The fourth house is home. It's like the childhood home, but it's where we feel at home, right? And the sign on the cusp of it is Pisces. So the ruler is Neptune up in the 10th. And the 10th is the public eye. It's how we're seen by the public. It's traditionally called the career house, but it's like the public view of us. And so to have Neptune ruling the fourth says, like, basically he lives in the public eye. And because the planet is Neptune, there's some, like, illusion around it. So we might not see him clearly because there's... It's like when you take a picture and use that kind of smoky filter. It's a little bit of that. You know, Neptune's associated sometimes with things like glamour for that very reason. We might just get the glamour shot sometimes. The fifth house traditionally is called the house of children, but it's also creativity, sports, romance, things like that. With the moon there, exalted in Taurus, the children become very important. He's probably a romantic. The other thing in the fifth house besides his moon is the part of fortune, which is just what it sounds like, right? Benefit through the children, through creative pursuits. Yeah. The ruler of his fifth house, because he has Aries on the cusp of it, is Mars in the 11th. It's right on the cusp of the 12th, but it's in the 11th, suggesting he could be like best friends with his kids, that kind of thing. The 11th house being groups, but traditionally friends, goals, things like that. He just loves his kids. You know, any place that our lights are, our sun and our moon become pivotal places in our chart. You know, the moon is the emotional nature, and to have it there lodged in the fifth, the children become so important. The sixth house is service. It is work, like day-to-day work, small animals, servants if you got them. The ruler, because Taurus is on the cusp of it, the ruler is Venus in the 12th. And so the 6th house is our daily service, right? And the 12th house is more like collective service. And that's, really where his theme is. When we get around over there, I'll talk about it more. But there's this love of, or this feeling of needing to be of service. Because Venus is in the 12th house, it's service to the collective. The 7th house is traditionally marriage, partnerships, open enemies, same. Uranus is right on the cusp of the 7th. Saturn is in the 7th. They're kind of almost opposite energies. Uranus, on the cusp of the 7th would suggest somebody who gets married quickly or that type of thing, gets in and out quickly. Saturn, is the opposite, is perhaps delays in marriage, or marrying someone older, or liking someone who's more stabilized, grounded. Because it's tied to his 2nd house of values, I feel like he values the institution of marriage. And I think the way that Uranus is working in his chart was through the loss of his first wife, out of the blue, Uranus. So I think that's what's happening there. There's like surprises around marriage. The 8th house is the house of, sex, death, and taxes. But more broadly, it's the Plutonian house. It's where we would deal with grief and loss. The ruler of his chart is there, is Jupiter in Cancer. This is close to his heart. Cancer rules the moon. Deeply involved in the themes of loss. Pluto is there in its own house. Kind of doubling up that energy, that Plutonian energy. The 9th house is our higher values. It is higher spirituality. It is, it rules the law, journalism, publishing. And I think he was a lawyer initially. The sign on the cusp of it is Leo, which is ruled by his sun in the 12th again. And so we have to get into the 12th house, because I think 5 out of his 10 houses, or rulers of his houses, all lead back to the 12th, which is where he really lives. The North Node is in the 9th house, in Leo, conjunct Chiron, which is the wounded healer, and conjunct Regulus, the fixed star Regulus, which is the king star. So we're going to talk about that. The North Node is our, how we live, our highest purpose, our highest mission in life. It's maybe not where we're so comfortable. That would be the South Node. But the North Node is what we're to strive towards. Okay? And people, most charts I look at, there's multiple kind of themes in a chart. Towards living mission or purpose. Sometimes it's creativity, communication, healing, all these different things. Rarely have I seen charts that so explicitly said you have a mission, a very specific mission. And I saw that with the chart of Donald Trump, and I don't know how well I articulated that. But I see that also in the chart of Joe Biden, whereas Donald Trump is here to act as a catalyst for the United States, and I say that for several reasons. He's got the king star on the ascendant, he's born a full moon eclipse. And when you look at his chart dropped on the United States, his Mars lands right on his sun, Uranus North Node, land right on the Mars of the United States. And so what he inspires for the United States is anger, right? Doesn't matter which side you're on. Is anger. Like, that's what he stirs up in the collective. And so If you're a person who's not involved with politics, you never look at it. Maybe you haven't experienced that, but if you looked at all on either side, you're a little ticked off, potentially, because that's kind of the energy that he inspires. The other thing about Donald Trump is he's got in his 12th house, which is our subconscious, it's the other side of the veil, but it's also how we relate to the collective. He has Mars and Pluto. Mars is anger and Pluto is rage. Mars comes up and slaps you really hard across the face. Pluto stabs you through the heart. It's issues of power and things like that. And so he taps into the collective in that way, potentially inspiring that in the public, which is an issue right now because we have Pluto and Mars square in transit. It's one of the reasons I offer the Plutonian wash with this particular reading. So the best thing we can do right now is try to step out of anger, try to step out of rage, try to center ourselves, try to ground ourselves, try to rise above it, and see that this is like a game and these are just players. And so I'm going to talk more about Biden's role. Sorry, off on a tangent. I tend to. So Biden also has the King Star Regulus, but he has it on the North Node. It's a very karmic thing. His role here is to rise into a position of prominence. It's in Leo. It's in the 9th house of higher values, higher spirituality, right? But has Chiron, which is a thing that looks like a little key sitting right next to it. And Chiron is called the wounded healer, and the mythology is, this centaur is born rejected by his mother, which is the first wound, then gets wounded in the flank and goes with a poison arrow, goes around trying to get it healed, and in the process becomes an amazing healer himself. However, unable to heal himself. It's more about healing others. And so the ruler of his North Node, Regulus, and Chiron in the 9th is the Sun in the 12th. And again, we go back to, and that Sun is in Scorpio. So we go back to these Plutonian themes because Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. When I first read his chart, looked at his chart, I started to cry. So if I start to cry in this, just ignore it. I do that. I'm a little bit emotional person. And I'll get to why when we get down to the 12th house. But anyway, on the 9th house themes, it would appear that he is fated to step into a position of leader, Leo, right? With an eye towards healing collective grief. That's his role. The 10th house is our public role. It is our career. The sign on the cusp is Virgo, again suggesting a healer. Virgo rules healing. The ruler of it is Mercury, again in Scorpio, in the 12th. Neptune's in the 10th, and we already talked about that. The ruler of the 11th, which is kind of the general public, it's future goals, it's groups of people, friendships. Libra's on the cusp of it, and Venus is the ruler, and she is also posited in his 12th. Mars is in the 11th. The 11th is also like causes, very driven towards a cause. It's in Scorpio, which is a pretty intense placement for Mars. My force out into the world. There's a tenacity that comes with the sign Scorpio. It's also on the cusp of the 12th, so I would read it in both houses. But all this Scorpio energy in the 12th, we're going to talk about that now. One would think that to have the Sun, which is the ego, the core of who the self is, in the 12th would be someone who works behind the scenes. The 12th is what is hidden, but it's more than that. It's the collective, and you'll actually find, if you go back through the charts of politicians and a lot of people in the public eye, you know, off the top of my head, I would say like Madonna has a 12th house sun. And you would never think, right? But a lot of presidents, politicians, things like that absolutely do. And the reason is because your planets in the 12th can tap into the collective, you know? So people feel somehow like they know that person or they can relate to that person. They're tapping something within you, right? And what Joe Biden taps is potentially grief, and not just potentially. That's really what his chart feels like. I keep hearing the Bible verse, yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, associated with him, because it seems to be the entire theme of his entire chart. So he's got this ability to tap in to the public through his 12th house. This is a person who is probably deeply spiritual. I think I saw that he's Catholic. He has repeatedly needed to turn back into himself, 12th house, and he needs a lot of time alone, actually, to process all this deep emotion and these deep feelings around it, which anybody with one of their lights, their sun and their moon in the 12th, needs a lot of alone time. For that reason, you need to be able to process through like what's happening in your life. Yeah. So on December 18th of 1972, his wife, and he'd just been elected to the Senate, he wasn't sworn in yet. His wife and his 3 small children went to go Christmas shopping, and they were hit by a tractor trailer carrying some corn cobs. His wife and his infant daughter were killed. And his two and 3-year-old little boys were hospitalized. He was going to quit the Senate, but he was talked out of it, so he went ahead and he got sworn in, and they talk about him in trains because he rode his train back and forth every day to see his sons, because again, in his chart, his children are super important to him, right? And at that time, like, I think he had like Neptune in transit right on the ascendant, like ego wipeout, Uranus opposing the moon. He was just rocked by that. And then if that weren't enough, his son Bo died May 30th of 2015 of a brain tumor, and that is the reason, supposedly. He didn't run for president in 2016. But, you know, I tend to think the whole thing was fated because he's meant to run now. And that's my own, you know, this is the way I read a chart and what I see and what I garner from it. And I feel into the energies, which is all planets are energies, right? But I think you need an extra dose, basically, of grief to be able to deal with our collective grief. We've got almost, at this time right now as I'm doing this, we have almost 200,000 Americans dead. And what I hear when I hear that is we have almost 200,000 families and friends grieving. So the numbers are so much higher of people that are actually grieving this. And the energy that Joe Biden carries in his place in our world is about helping to heal that grief. Why? Because when you've been through something, you know how to sit with someone who's been through that. That is the purpose. And it's like his life is set up to do exactly that. I don't know why someone would choose such a life. But there is a sense, you know, with 12th house planets that you have some special work to do, and it involves the collective. And that's another reason why you see so many politicians with those placements, because there's this deep subconscious need to serve the collective. And Joe Biden, he serves through holding space. That's why you'll hear him say, oh, my son died. Oh, my daughter died. My wife died. You know, fully half of his children have died. It's so that he can hold this space in this time right now. And I will talk about his transits and Donald Trump's transits and things like that for the election in another video. But if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, share, If you have suggestions for someone you'd like me to read, throw that up. Have a great day. Peace.